Hello, welcome to the video. So today I was just going to talk a little bit about elbow pain, which we see often in our office. Specifically, we're going to talk about lateral elbow pain, so lateral being on this side. Obviously, we see some issues on the medial side too. It's just far less than what we see on this side. And we want to talk a little bit about how important a good diagnosis is first before we start any treatment on it. So the most common condition that affects the lateral elbow is lateral epicondylitis. It's also known as epicondylosis, only because we kind of get away from the itis, which assumes that there is an inflammatory effect. Typically, by the time we see a lot of these conditions, are getting a little bit more towards that chronic phase, and inflammation is really not much of an issue. It's more of an issue with the soft tissue, and scarring is starting to take effect. So just a little bit of anatomy on that. So our common extensor tendon, which is the tendon that supports a lot of our wrist extensor muscles. So it attaches right on the elbow. So if you kind of feel around your elbow, you get that little bumpy spot. That's our epicondyle. And this is typically, or anywhere around it, is typically where patients will complain about a little bit of pain. That common extensor tendon is right off to the front of that. So this is the most common issue that we do see with the elbow. Something else that we might see in addition to that will be an issue with the radial nerve. So the radial nerve, which obviously it's starting up here at our neck, as it travels down, it loops around our shoulder, it travels down, it actually bifurcates or splits here, and we have the motor, or the part that controls a little bit of strength, actually dips underneath a muscle here called our supinator. Our supinator, it does just that, it supinates our elbow and wrist. But as it dips under, so it's going to kind of hook around here, and we can have some issue in here. So you kind of see how close those two issues are, and a lot of times they will present kind of similar, but there are some differences that we'll actually find when we review some of the patient's history. Typically, if they complain about obviously any weakness, because it's affecting the nerve, the motor part of the nerve. Also, if they start to talk about most of their pain is down towards their forearm, that's another sign that might lead us to think a little bit more nerve. But also too, they might say that their symptoms are worse at night. So those are kind of the three big things that we kind of find in their history that will lead us to think a little bit more nerve. But also we're going to do some additional testing to kind of uncover what's the true cause of their issue before we start any treatment. The biggest reason is, if it is a nerve issue, there's some differences that we got to consider. It doesn't like things like compression. So you guys have probably seen the counter braces or the tennis elbow braces that sit right here, and they can actually be really effective for true lateral epicondylitis. But if it's a radial nerve issue, we don't want to add more compression. So a lot of times we might have a patient present, they think it's lateral epicondylitis, they're wearing the tennis elbow brace, we have them remove it, and that's usually part of the start of them getting a little bit better, is removing things like that as well. A couple other things to point out with the lateral epicondylitis. So obviously the lay name for it is tennis elbow. If somebody does a lot of racket type of sports, the statistic is about 50% of those people in the lifetime of playing it will develop it at some point. But of all the patients that we do see with lateral epicondylitis, only about 5% of them, or even less, actually play or do anything with racket sports at all. So there's a lot of other things that can contribute. It could be work related, but it's anything that where you're using a lot of repetition and it starts to break down at that common extensor muscle or tendon, excuse me. So I hope that kind of sheds a little light on some of the things that we do look at with lateral epicondyle pain, and how we treat it again really depends on first getting a proper diagnosis, and once we figure that out, then we kind of set somebody on the course of good treatment. So if you have any questions, please let us know, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.